Welcome everyone to the 7th round of Norway Chess 2025. We have Arjun Erigaisi here, who is currently one of the best players in the world number 3. And he is playing against the world champion Gukesh, who just beat Magnus Carlsen on the previous day. The game has started. It seems like Gukesh is not here. He generally arrives quite early, but today Gukesh is late to the game. And Arjun is looking upwards for the openings that are taking place in other games. Arjun has had a good event until now. Gukesh is here. For Gukesh, this will be a very important round because he hasn't been doing well against Arjun in classical chess. Yes, they haven't played too many games recently, but in Tata Steel, in Wijk Aan Zee, Arjun did beat Gukesh. And in 2021, they had a period where they were playing similar tournaments, and Arjun had beaten Gukesh at the Braganca Open, at Guimares, in Plovdiv. He also then beat him in Sigamen in 2023. Gukesh tells his opponent that I'm just adjusting all the pieces here. And we also had a death match between these two players in Hyderabad, which was in 2022. Both had just crossed 2700 at that point, and Arjun had actually come out on top in that death match as well. So if one could say that technically Arjun has been a big problem opponent for Gukesh. And Gukesh, by the way, is nearly 4 to 5 minutes late for this game, but is calmly adjusting all his pieces. Now gets ready for his move, looks at the pieces, and I think this is an important thing for all the youngsters out there. If you are late to the game, don't rush it, calm yourself down, and then go for the first move. What will be Gukesh's choice? He did play 1 e4 against Magnus Carlsen. Will he continue with the same move? Yes, he does. Pawn to e4 played, and Arjun comes back. And what's his choice going to be? Will he play e5? Will he play c5? Will he play the Caro-Kann, the French? Many options here for Arjun. He waits for a bit for his first move. Mind games here, plays d6. Wow. That's not a very common move at top level chess. And I'm sure that Gukesh is a bit surprised by Arjun's choice here. And now Gukesh has to decide what to do. He goes d4. Pawn to d4 on the board. And now knight f6, I guess, by Arjun. It's back. And yes, plays his knight out to f6. So we have maybe the Perk defense on the board, perhaps. It could also be the Philidor if e5 is played. Knight c3 played by Gukesh, defending his pawn. And now Arjun does go for it. He goes g6, asking Gukesh if he wants to go for the ambitious systems with f4 or bishop e3, queen d2, or go for the more positional approach with knight f3 and so on. He does play his knight out to f3. And Arjun plays his bishop to g7. So knight f3 setup is generally considered to be very positional in nature and is combined usually with bishop going to e2. But Gukesh has played his bishop to c4. He has to now be aware of this tactics with knight e4, d5. He does play h3 here. And now Arjun can go for knight e4. Yes, he plays it. Knight takes e4 on the board. And actually black has surprisingly equalized out of the opening. Gukesh goes bishop f7, which is, according to me, a very risky move strategically. Because after rook takes f7, he takes back the knight. And here, black gets the bishop pair as well as the central pawns. So in a way, Gukesh is taking a lot of risks here. pawn comes up to d5, attacking the knight on e4. And now the knight has to move away, but where? Knight c3, knight g3, he goes knight to c3. And now one of the best ways to play is put the knight here and eventually go for the e5 break. But Arjun is super aggressive here. He pushes his pawn to c5 and he's telling Gukesh, if you take, I'll push it even further, pushing all your pieces behind. Gukesh quickly castles it out here. But this is getting a bit risky for Gukesh, because pawn takes pawn. Just think about it. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, and then e5. You have two super strong central pawns here. Arjun takes. Yes, he takes the pawn. And now knight takes d4. So white does have very strong knights in the center. The knight comes out to c6. And e5 is the idea next. Gukesh goes back, knight to f3, at least putting pressure on the d5 pawn. He doesn't want two black pawns to be on e5 and d5. Arjun pushes forward, d4. And now the knight comes into the center with knight e4. And then you go queen d5, bishop f5. Yes, he goes queen to d5. Strong move. Gukesh under a lot of pressure here right out of the opening. He goes rook e1, just 14 moves played. And if you think about it, he does not have the center control. He doesn't have the bishop pair. And he started off with the white pieces. So Arjun essentially has outplayed him totally in this opening. Also, Arjun has 1 hour 20 minutes. Gukesh has 55 minutes. So 25 extra minutes there for Arjun as well. Pawn to c3, trying to break the structure, and Arjun pushes forward even further. d3 on the board. Do you actually trade the queens here with queen b3? Because Gukesh, by the way, here bishop f5 was much stronger, attacking the knight, but instead he had gone d3, rook e3 played. Now, okay, you are not threatening rook takes because of queen takes e4. Bishop comes to f5, putting pressure here on the e4 knight. And the knight comes back to g3, attacking the bishop on f5. Rook goes to d8. So Arjun nurturing his strong pawn here in the center. Gukesh finally developing his bishop, hoping that he can get his queen out, and then the rook in. e5 played, planning e4 next. Whew. And knight e1. Actually, it's very interesting to see that Gukesh is going after this pawn on d3. But it's so well defended for the time being. But the threat is to take and then take here on d3. That's the plan. Gukesh is fully focused here. And Arjun now has to decide. But I guess e4 is the best move. He pushes his pawn forward. And these pawns are just so strong. If you take here, I could even get one more pawn. Now these 3 pawns. So Gukesh, good or bad, goes for f3. Because with this move, he can at least fight for, the space in the center. He takes on f3. There were other ways to continue. For example, queen c5, fe4, maybe going back, and there's a pin here. The knight could jump here, the bishop, but he took ef. Knight takes f3 is on the board. White pieces do get some breathing space finally. But now bishop e6. Arjun is like, I'm not going to give away my bishop pair so easily. Knight jumps back to e4. For the time being, there's no real threat as such. Arjun plays the best move, knight to e5. For the time being, Gukesh has to survive this position. Knight e5. What does he do? He takes on e5. Arjun takes back with the bishop. Fantastic play. Look at these two bishops. They are just simply amazing. And now the rook can join in. He plays queen e1, lining up against these bishops. But there's not really a good discovered check or an attack. Like, for example, if you go like knight g5, then I can take, and when you take on e5, I have rook f1 check, takes, and then e5 would hang. So he can't go here. He goes knight g3, attacking these two bishops. Now he goes bishop f4, and this is a mistake. Rook f2 was the winning move, and it was quite a complex line. Maybe I can show you at the end of this game, but for now, bishop f4 played, rook takes e6, and Arjun takes on d2, and Arjun recognizes that if queen d2, e6 is hanging. But Gukesh chops off the g6 pawn, king comes to h7, the rook is attacked, the queen is attacked, and now queen e6. Could it be that Arjun missed this move or not really? He takes on e6, 7 minutes for Arjun, 13 for Gukesh. It's now time for them to speed up. They're on move 29. The position is simpler in nature, knight f1. But black has lost all his advantage. He does have the d pawn still, and the rooks doubled here. By the way, an important moment in the game, maybe check and rook d8 is better, but goes rook d7. And I think this will allow knight to come to d2 and block the pawn. Knights are supposed to be the best blockaders of the pawns. So knight d2, great move, check, king goes to h1, and you can see both of them playing super quick. 4 minutes 50 seconds for Gukesh, 4 minutes 11 seconds for Arjun, brings his knight forward, rook comes up to offer a trade of rooks. Do you want to trade it or not? I think trading is good, but Gukesh denies it. Goes rook d6 now, Arjun. And knight to e5 played. Attacking the rook here and the pawn. He goes rook d8. Maybe rook e7 was a stronger move, pinning the knight. And you can see Gukesh trying to play quickly with 3 minutes 30 seconds. Both of them under a lot of pressure. And here rook f1 check. Keeping the knight on the board. Doesn't want to just trade it for the bishop. Check. Whoa, the king is almost getting checkmated here. Because no squares for the king anymore. But it's not so easy to convert this. King e7. Plays a check and tries to gain time. Maybe king e6 should also have been considered actually here. Let's say king e6 and continue this position. Might have been better, but he goes king e8, knight e5 played by Gukesh, rook e6. Now the players have crossed move 40, so they will get 10-second increment per move. Again, Gukesh makes 2 quick moves, repeats, and then is ready to now change the move. King takes and takes the pawn. You can see that white is 2 pawns up, but black has some activity here. The knight is doing an excellent job of defending this pawn. Rook d2 attacking the knight. Rook f3 defending the knight. Beautiful. He's played it well. And now pawn to a5. He pushes pawn to h4 here. And the king comes up to e7. The king goes to h2. This is very, very nice position for Gukesh. The way in which he kind of fought back was quite amazing. Arjun missing some golden opportunities in this game. b4. The black king is coming in, and with just 20 seconds each for both the players, it's going to be quite intense. Now king c4 maybe. Yes, he brings his king in, attacking the knight and the pawn. Knight goes back to f2. This pawn is defended. Can you take on a5 with the bishop? Yes, he takes it. Attacks now the pawn on c3. Knight to g4. Gukesh attacks his own pawn here, like h6 pawn. And rook d6 defending here, attacking here. Knight check. King b3. Knight f5. Rook goes to a6. Both players playing super quick. Gukesh down to 25 seconds. Arjun has 3 minutes 54. He takes a very important pawn there on a4. And Gukesh is going after the h6 pawn. Rook c6 played. Rook comes up. There's a check here. King to a3. Pawn c4 played. You can't come to king b3 here to check. You have to be careful of Gukesh's knights. His knights are super tricky, as we noticed even yesterday in the game against Magnus. But here, Arjun is back with some chances. Bishop c3, a terrible move here. Bishop c1, and the position could have been held because he defends the pawn. But with bishop c3, rook d5, now it's difficult to defend this pawn. So king here. He first goes rook b5. Attacking this pawn. b6. Now takes on h6. Bishop to a5 played, defending the pawn. c4 is hanging. But guys, now, okay, the rook has to be saved. White has two connected passers, and this is winning for Gukesh, but has to play carefully still because the b pawn is coming down the board. Check, king b4. He goes g4. And now rook c5 played. King goes to g6. The h pawn is a runner here for sure. King f7. Gives another check. Repeats twice. This is what Gukesh is doing well, gaining those precious 10 seconds with every repetition. And now going in with his king. And now no more checks. Arjun goes rook c4, attacking these pawns. But a check here on b1, forcing the king to go to a4. Check again, repeating for a couple of seconds there. g5 played now by Gukesh. Bishop check. King comes here, and now I think the king is ready to enter and push the g pawn down the board. Bishop e5. He goes rook f1. King a3. Rook f3 check. King a2. And now rook e3, offering a trade of rooks. He must take, otherwise the bishop would be lost. b4 played. g6. Which pawn is stronger? King b1, and he goes knight to c4. The bishop comes here, and he pushes his pawn to g7, takes, king takes, and this is lost because the knight can actually stop the b pawn, and the h pawn is just queening. Arjun resigns. Gukesh scores a huge win here, and with this win, he actually moves up the leaderboard and moves to 10.5 points, just 1 point away from Fabiano Caruana. He actually moves ahead of Magnus Carlsen because Magnus drew his game and won in the Armageddon. Here, I would say this was a heartbreak for Arjun because he played so well in the opening. He built up a winning position. He also got a position where he could finish Gukesh off, but he couldn't. Once again, Gukesh's resilience triumphs just like it did in Magnus's game. The world champion is showing that he is a tough nut to crack. This is one of the critical moments of the game. Gukesh here brought his knight back and attacked the bishop. If you look at the position, you will see that all of black's pieces are active, so this is the moment to strike. And here, Arjun played bishop f4, which was a mistake because it allowed rook takes e6. The way to get a winning position here was to enter with rook f2, threatening a mate in 1. Of course, Arjun would have seen this, but after knight e4, you are attacking the rook, the mate threat is gone, but in comes this amazing move, bishop h3. Now you can't take the rook because of queen g2 mate, so you must take the bishop here. And now comes a check, king h1, and the bishop drops back. What you are essentially saying is that I'm a piece down here as black, but I believe in my attacking chances because your king is weak. So king g1, so that now the knight can take the rook. Earlier it was pinned. And now this very beautiful move, rook to f3. And perhaps it's very difficult to find such a move. But if you look at the position that is reached here, you will realize that black is basically counting on the fact that his pieces will just break through into the attack. Like for example, if c4 is played, you play queen f5, you keep the attack flowing like knight f2, you have even some very, very feared move king f7, because he's threatening here check and to trade. So if you take like rook f2 with the idea of like bishop b6, of course there's queen f2 and bishop e3, but you can, even if you start with this, then there is check and it ends in a draw. So better is to play king f7 with the idea of bishop b6, and here black continues to have winning chances. I believe the tough thing for Arjun to spot would have surely been to put the bishop first backwards on c7 with the idea of coming here. And the second thing is to trade the rook here with rook to f3. These are all very non-standard ways of playing, but they were very, very effective.